This is a course in mind training. So this is another installment of Golden Moments in A Course in Miracles. This is actually a very important passage in the course. It's in chapter 1, I believe. So it's early on, and it's Jesus, originally just talking to Helen and talking to Helen and Bill and saying, this is a course in mind training. This is a course in training your mind, right? To think along the lines of the Holy Spirit, right? To think along the lines of the Holy Spirit's thought system. And it requires some vigilance and some discipline on your part. This is not going to happen unless you actually put this into practice. You put the theory into practice. So the text actually is like the theory or the theoretical foundation or the theoretical underpinnings, and the workbook is the practice. But even with the text is a practice in itself. Reading itself is a practice. In order to read, you have to. There's a certain degree of mental discipline and intention you have to put into reading. So anyway, that's why we're doing this. So here we go. We're going to read this, A Course in Mind Training. This is a course in mind training. All learning involves attention and study at some level. Some of the later parts of the course rest too heavily on these earlier sections not to require their careful study. You will also need them for preparation. Without this, you may become much too fearful of what is to come to make constructive use of it. Some of the later steps in this course involve a more direct approach to God Himself. It would be unwise to start on these steps without careful preparation, or all will be confused with fear, and the experience will be more traumatic than beatific. This is a very fascinating passage, very important passage, and one you really have to keep in mind, and one that before you keep it in mind, you might want to try to understand what it means. So that's what we're going to try to do right now. This is a course in mind training. All learning involves attention and study at some level. That's a given, right? That goes without saying, but it actually needs to be repeated. That, in order to learn something, you actually have to give it your attention, right? You have to. And what's the best way to learn something? Well, they say the best way to learn something is to teach it. But you could also say the best way to learn something is to fall in love with the subject, right? If you fall in love with the subject, then you're going to give it your full attention. It's like when you fall in love with someone, you want to know everything about them, and you want to, you are giving your beloved your full attention. So all learning involves attention and study at some level. And Jesus definitely wants us to study this course. He wants us to, he wanted Helen and Bill, and he wants the rest of us as well, to really study and engage with this course and try to really understand what it's saying. Otherwise, why would he have given it, right? 1,200 pages or 500,000 words. That's a lot of words. Obviously, Jesus knew what he was doing. It's not obvious, but let's assume that he did know what he was doing. And the course is very intentional. And so if it's very intentional, then we want to take it with at least a certain degree of intention ourselves. And intention and attention. Some of the later parts of the course rest too heavily on these earlier sections not to require their careful study. So this was Jesus talking to Helen and Bill and saying, listen, you got to actually review the notes. Remember, the course is notes. This is a Course in Miracles. Please take notes. You have to review the course notes. Just like when you take a college course, how do you learn except by reviewing? Right? So you have to study and review the course. Right? Take it seriously. Try to understand what it's saying. You will also need them for preparation. So in other words, Jesus was telling Helen and Bill, be very attentive to these earlier sections of the Course, because I'm laying out in these early sections, I'm laying out some very basic principles, some very foundational principles that you need in order to understand where we're going with this. And then what does he say? He says, without this, you may become much too fearful of what is to come to make constructive use of it. So without understanding these fundamental principles that Jesus is bringing in early on in the Course, what are we talking about? We're talking about the first the first 6 chapters or so of the Course really lay out these foundational principles and premises. And so he wants you to really understand what he's saying in these early sections of the Course. Some of the later steps in the Course involve a more direct approach to God himself. What does that mean? It means that you're focused, that you're going towards the holy instant, right? You are trying to experience God directly. I may have to take a moment. Give me a second, bud. I'm making a video. Okay? So you may have to I'm conflating two things. You have to understand where we're going with all this. And the holy instant, which is like the second half of the workbook, the whole workbook, but the second half of the workbook in particular, is focused on how to get to this holy instant. But the thing is that, and Jesus says this early on, and he makes a point, and we probably need to read that passage too, so maybe I'll do that next. He says, the ego will move from suspiciousness to viciousness. Now, what does this mean? This means that once you start to go towards God, right? Once you start to go towards a direct experience of God, the ego will move from suspiciousness, like it's sees that you're up to something. It doesn't know what you're up to, because the ego doesn't know God, right? The ego does not know spirit, and God does not know ego. The two never meet, according to the Course. And there's no compromise. It's either one or the other. So it's either you're in the ego or you're in spirit. And the two are not, you cannot, I use the word conflate. You cannot conflate the two. They're mutually exclusive thought systems. So as you start to move towards spirit, the ego will become suspicious that you are doing that. And then as you really start to move in that direction, the ego will move towards viciousness. Now, what does that look like? It means as you start to get closer to the truth, the ego is going to make a lot of noise, right? It will throw everything in the book at you. It will say you are guilty, you are worthless, you are shameful, you are not worthy of love. You should feel doomed. You should feel like you are worthy of hell. That is the ego. And that is what the ego will do in order to keep you from moving in the direction that you're trying to move, which is towards God. So that's why Jesus says it would be unwise to start on these steps without careful preparation, or all will be confused with fear. And the experience will be more traumatic than beatific. What's the difference between awe and fear? Awe is actually it's a real thing in the presence of the sacred, where you are actually like, like, maybe that's why it's called awe. It's like, it's like, right? Awe is like a onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is like, the word is what it sounds like what it is. It's like when you're in awe, you are like, like, and so it can be shocking. It can be, depending on what you're dealing with. What I'm trying to say is, the ego will actually come in and make it very difficult for you. How does that work? I think this is just something you have to experience for yourself, and then you will know. We all experience it on some level. Whenever we feel guilty or afraid or ashamed or whatever, we're experiencing that. But we're talking about when you actually commit to really having the experience, the direct experience of God. You will face challenges. There will be hurdles. There will be obstacles on the way. It's not going to be that easy to go in that direction. So Jesus is trying to prepare us with these early chapters, and he's trying to say, all right, I'm just showing you, I'm telling you what you're up against and what you might be facing, and then you will know when you get there, you will have a better idea. Now, I have I've done a lot of work with ayahuasca in particular, and I've talked about this on this channel. Ayahuasca is known for, most psychedelics, and ayahuasca is in that family, psychedelics. They usually go in two directions, right? They can go two directions. You can have a very beatific, as Jesus uses the word, and you can also have a very traumatic. It could be traumatic, it could be beatific. You could experience, heavenly realms, but you could also experience quite hellish realms, and the hellish realms can be shocking, right? Heavenly realms can be awesome. You never know what you're going to get, with ayahuasca. You could get both of them in one sitting, right? You can start with the shock and awe, and you can end with beatific, and you can start with beatific and end with traumatic. It depends. But the point is that if you are not prepared with ayahuasca, it may be unsettling. But if you know what you're getting yourself into, you have a better chance maybe of really learning and getting something more from the experience. Because for example, if you are using ayahuasca, for example, and you're experiencing a lot of stuff that you don't like, and it's like you're fighting it, you're not going to get as much out of it, I think, than if you are able to just be calm and be the witness. And then you'll get more out of it that way. And it will probably not be as crazy as if you're fighting it. And that's the same thing with life. As long as you're fighting life, as long as you are resisting, you will not learn as much, because you will be inserting yourself rather than being the calm observer. And this is where the Course is taking us. It's taking us to be that calm observer, to identify more and more with the witness, and know that we really are this witness. So, and to do that, you really have to train your mind. And what it means is you have to be vigilant against the ego. You have to recognize when the ego is coming in, and say, no, I'm not going there. I'm gonna remain the calm observer. I'm gonna remain the witness. I'm not gonna let the ego take me out of this centered place, the quiet center. I'm not going to let the ego take me out of the quiet center. Anyway, I hope this is helpful. This is a course in mind training. This is a very important line to keep in mind throughout the whole course. This is a course in mind training. And that Jesus really wants us to study this and to try to understand it as best we can. And the understanding will come with time and practice, right? Everything will come with time and practice. Keep going, keep at it. Don't stop. We're all getting there together. So I hope this is helpful, and always your comments are always welcome. So see you very soon with more. All right, bye-bye.